Dave Forman, thank you so much for joining us today. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast. We've been friends for a little over a year now. So,
Thank you for having me, Matt.
yeah, man. So I just want to give the listeners a quick little taste of how we met. And so if I remember right, it was sometime in like July-ish, about 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. And we were both at the park. We are single dads on the weekend, just because our wives work and stuff. And yeah, I remember you come like our kids were playing together, and you came up to me at the end of hanging out, and you're like, "Hey, man, it's kind of hard being a dad, and I just moved to the area and looking for other friends. Are you willing to? I don't want to be weird, but can I have your number?" And I was like, "That takes balls." So I was like, "Yeah, man, for sure." And ever since then, we've been hanging.
Yep. Yeah, it's something that I don't do often, ask guys out at the park. So um,
You
yeah,
didn't ask me on a second date though. You just asked for my number. You just left me hanging.
that's what I do.
Yeah. Where'd you grow up, man?
Orange County, California. So surfer kid in San Clemente, and yeah, born and raised Orange County.
How long did you live there?
Lived there my whole life, really, until we moved out here to Colorado. So
And you moved during COVID?
we moved during COVID. Yes, we were looking to buy a house, and the real estate out there was just exploding, and we could not get anything there that fit our needs for less than 650, 700K. And that got you like a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, no attached garage, no nothing. So we were like, yeah, we need to move. That's when we had our first on the way, and
Yeah.
just wanted a little bit more space. So
What brought you to Colorado? Do you have like family out here, or?
my wife's brother lives out here,
Okay, right on.
and the plan was that the whole family was going to move out here, but it's still just us and her brother. But he lives right up the street, and their kids are great. Um, yeah, so that's kind of all that we have out here, and part of the reason that I jumped off the ledge at the park that day and took the leap of faith to ask you out because it yeah, had absolutely no friends out here, nobody. I was a stay-at-home dad at that time, so it was a pretty challenging transition.
Yeah, especially during the lockdowns and everything, and just being eased up. Um,
Yep.
like, and I do admire you for that, because it's hard. It is hard to make friends in the adult world, let alone adult friends that also have kids.
Yep.
You know, So I do want to dive and I know you're the founder of Nestheads, and I want to dive into that because it's so interesting. But to begin with, just to give the listeners a little bit of your background. So you went to high school, I'm assuming, in Orange County.
Yeah, so I actually went to 12 years of private Catholic school. So went to grade school for 8 years, private Catholic school, and then a private Catholic high school. So yeah, I had a lot of exposure to uh, Catholicism.
Dude, I had no clue about that.
Yeah, I try
That
to
this
keep
is
that
this is
under the
like
rug.
brand. Why?
Um, there's just a lot of associations with it, and
Sure.
it's yeah. I guess as we progress with this podcast, more will be revealed there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, spent a lot of time in
What
the
was your
church.
first job out of high school then? Did you go from high school straight into like a trade or something like that?
So I guess just while I was in high school, I worked at. I got my first job at 15, bussing tables. I worked at CompUSA, so that was kind of like my first real serious job, selling computers, selling computer parts, all that stuff. Moved over to Best Buy, sold digital cameras, was selling PDAs. That's right before the iPhone came out. Was selling PDAs and digital cameras, all that stuff. Worked at Red Robin, so that was a fun job.
Yum.
Yeah, Yum is right.
So a lot of service industries here and there.
Yep.
And then where did your life lead you after that?
So I was
Let me rewind. So is that like the first, because I know Nestheads is really like AI focused and like really cutting edge. Is that kind of where you got your taste of technology, is working working at those companies?
I'd say that's where I got a little bit of exposure to it. I was really into computer gaming at that time, and just really always liked technology. But I was really into rally racing. That's kind of like the beginning of all of this. This my own personal story was rally racing. When I was actually flying planes back when I was like 16, 17 ish. The goal that I had was to go to Embry-Riddle Flight School, or Embry-Riddle Air Force Academy, after high school. That was my plan. But 3 days after I graduated, that's when my dad passed away.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Something Nothing Everything podcast. Without your support, this podcast couldn't happen, so I really appreciate it. If you have a moment, make sure you hit that like, follow, and subscribe button. And then if you want further information on how to get involved with the podcast as far as submitting questions, go over to www.snepodcast.com. Again, that's www.snepodcast.com. Now back to the show.
So it kind of left our whole family in financial turmoil, and I couldn't justify leaving the state to go anywhere, leaving my mom and sister. So it was, I kind of had to really settle into what I was interested in, which was rally racing. I got into a lot of trouble. Was a street racer. Was got really into gambling. Just kind of fell off the deep end when my dad passed away. So it was really, really challenging time for me. Um, so I naturally started working at like performance shops,
Mm-hmm.
and did a lot of tuning on vehicles, building engines, all that stuff. And then when I was about 22, that's when I started my own shop.
So you said 3 days after graduating high school.
Mhm.
Was it, if you don't mind me prying a little
Not
bit,
at all. Let's go.
was it something that was anticipated, like cancer, or was it just a sudden?
So at when I was 16, so about 2 years before he passed, he went into a coma for like 2 weeks, and he died a couple times. Like his heart stopped. So we all were pretty prepared for it, but it was kind of a random thing. My dad had um, he had his own nest heads, his own inner demons, his battles that he had, and what he would do in those times is he would be like, no, I'm above this, I'm going to power through it. So what sent him in the hospital the first time was actually, um, him getting sick and like, no, I'm going to power through this. And he went on a long run during the rain, got pneumonia,
Mhm.
and through that process, they discovered some heart defect that he had, and yeah, and just ever since that point, the remaining 2 years of his life, he was just off, and then just middle of the night, mom comes screaming, barging through my door in the room, that my dad was on the ground, and I went in there and yeah, just tried to revive him and couldn't do anything, and it was a pretty.
So that was when you're 16, the first time he went into the coma, and
Mhm.
this now you're talking about when he passed away.
Yep. So that was 3 days after I graduated, and
Man,
just yeah, it really shook up my whole entire framing of reality, and
yeah.
everything that I was taught the last 12 years of Catholic school just instantly went out the window. And I don't blame it on the church or on the education that I had. It
Hmm.
was it was great, but it was just my interpretation of all of it, and the reason that people die, and there was just a lot of reframing that needed to be done. So it was really, for me, a moment, like a rebirth moment, where it was like,
Hmm.
what the fuck do I do now? Um, I now have to pick up all these pieces. Everything, my entire reality just got put into a blender and shaken up. And
What were your feelings when he passed? Was it, just to throw some ideas out there? Was it like a why me? Why is this happening to us, or anything like that?
again, it was so intense, like right when it happened, because a lot of my understanding of why people died was, um, because they deserve it, or
Hmm.
they were being called for, some higher purpose or something, and just I could not accept anything that I was taught at that point.
From
So
a
it was,
Catholic school.
yeah.
Yeah. So then you really kind of dove into uh thrill seeking.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that? Was it to numb some of the complicated feelings that you're having?
Yeah, just it was overwhelming, all of the internal demons and struggles that I had at the time, and uh, it was the easy way out. I had, friends that were really into street racing, and uh, got, like I said, really into gambling. Just a lot of these really unproductive behaviors, and it took me a really long time to unwind all of that and unpack it all. But many years of therapy that I did in my 20s, once I got a little serious about it and realized that, I can't keep doing this. It's not, and as you mature too, a lot of these
Yeah.
things uh, kind of reveal themselves to you.
So at 18, you really started diving into this. When did you kind of pull the throttle back? You said you went to therapy in your 20s. Is that when you started dialing things back? Because rally racing's intense. It's like
Yeah,
go,
so
go,
all
go.
of the racing that I did was regrettably on the street until I was yeah, until I really started my shop. So I started the shop at 22, and I got really serious about business and entrepreneurship, and learned just a tremendous amount from that process. I started it with 3 grand, and I don't know how I got approved for a lease uh, on
A
a
22-year-old kid coming in with 3 grand in his
yeah.
pocket saying, "I've got a dream."
Yep. It's that fake it
Yeah.
till you make it thing, gotta do what you have to do to uh make your dreams your reality.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting thing. I really didn't know how to do anything on cars very deeply. I didn't know how to do a timing belt job, and that was the first thing that I was marketing. Um I knew I could do it safely. I knew I could do it properly. And, within like a year or two, we were known as the guy to go to
For timing
for
belts.
timing belts. Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah. So it's been quite the journey. And then that's when I'd say I was like 25, and I was building a rally car for like 4 or 5 years. Even before I had the shop, that was part of the motivations to get in the shop, was to have a place to be able to store and work on my race car. And looking back, it's like the silliest thing in the world to start a business and to, uh, pursue like a career, just to have somewhere to store your car and
Yeah.
work on it. But, and then I did my first rally race at like 25, 26, and I got into drifting too.
Okay.
So I got my pro license for drifting back in 20, I think it was 2014. So that was a lot of fun, but I was spending like $5,000 a weekend on tires. We'd go out, burn up 32 tires just in a day. So it
Oh
was
my
a
god.
very expensive
Did you
hobby.
make I was about to say it's an expensive hobby, but did you make any money off of it?
No, no,
So
even the pro guys, unless you're like in the top 10, I'd say you're not making anything. It's all just,
so were you taking money from the shop and dumping it into that as a hobby?
yeah.
Okay, that makes
Well, it's
sense.
marketing, so business write-off.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess so. You just drive around with a bunch of labels of your own shop on your car.
Yep,
Did it work?
it
Did it
did.
pull
I mean,
work
we got a
like
lot of customers from it. Certainly don't think it was like justifiable. Again, looking back, it was um, all of that was again a result of me not taking the dive inward and answering that call.
you were seeking outward?
Yep.
Yeah, I can relate to that with the thrill seeking aspect of life, and it's very easy to kind of branch out and deal with or not deal with, but numb a lot of things that are going on internally by constantly seeking the next thrill.
Right.
So you do that, you start that in your 20s, you keep that going until
So it
when?
was it was a really successful business. I was yeah, we were doing 7 figures every year. Let's see. It was well staffed. Had a great crew. Uh, they were all really friends. That was part of the problem why that business was so hard to scale. I also saw so much of the vulnerabilities in human nature and flaws in human nature just from these intense situations that you have by operating a auto repair shop. Like service writers, those guys are freaking heroes. Um,
What is a service writer for people out of the industry?
so service writers are basically the employees in auto repair shops or at dealerships that are selling service. So you bring your vehicle into a dealership, and there's a technician that's looking it over and finding stuff wrong with your car. The service writer is the person that's communicating that to you and selling you the work essentially.
I
So
always feel like I'm getting ripped.
the auto repair industry is very challenging, and it's an incredibly difficult business to be successful in. It's the cost of parts are expensive. Like to find good technicians, it's very very hard.
Yeah. So you do that for a while, and then you kept it going until you moved out here, right? To Colorado.
Yeah, so I had my shop very well staffed up, and I was always like tinkering with software projects. I had a uh, like a little startup in my early 20s too, probably right before I started the shop. That was like uh, basically teaching people how to work on cars, and how to do these little repairs, kind of like guides. And I about 6 years into owning the shop, I had it running itself. I ended up going to a full time programming boot camp. It was like 14 grand. Just went for 3 months. Didn't go to the shop at all. Um, and just learned how to code. So it was a really cool experience, and got my first little taste of the tech industry. And I'm like, I really want to do this. I really want to transition to this. So I
Yeah.
had a so I decided to do a tech startup. It was called Part Stacker, and it was basically a price comparison website for car parts.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
Because right now there's not really. I guess there is with ChatGPT because you can get it to do anything with its API, but it's that is one of the more annoying things is when a mechanic comes at you and they're like, "Yeah, it's $80 for this air filter,"
right,
and it's like if you don't know, then you're like, "Oh, I guess that's just a fair price." You can Google it real quick, but then it's like, "Oh, am I sure I'm Googling the right component? Is this the right year, make, model? Is it a 6 cylinder or a 4 cylinder?
right,
Is it an all wheel drive or front wheel drive?"
right. And so there's always been just this massive gap in the automotive industry that I saw, in terms of automotive
Hmm.
software. They were, running these local databases, and it took them forever to like move to cloud once cloud was a thing. So I had just a lot of time to think about all of these solutions that needed, to happen in the auto repair industry, and that's actually one of these other projects that I've been working on. It's an AI ecosystem for the auto repair shop, because none of these things have been done yet, and it has been, like 5-6 years since I closed the shop. So
What's that company?
it's called Master Tech
Okay.
AI.
And the thought behind it.
So yeah, it's a AI ecosystem for auto repair shops. So the idea, is tying together. Uh, how I see it is really like an AI brain for the auto repair shop. So there's a lot of really clunky, cumbersome processes in the auto repair software industry still, and we're really tying everything together.
Right on. I worked at a local auto shop when I was 16 years old in Holly Springs.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think it was called Fast Lube Plus.
What'd you do there?
I did oil changes, I did coolant
Hmm.
like flushes, did tire rotations.
Interesting.
I was basically there was the master technician that I would help him out, and things like that. And I did that for about a year and a half.
Okay.
Um, and I just remember when I was cashing people out, the user interface for the shop itself was, I swear to God, straight out of the 80s. It looked new, like, oh, we updated the text to Times New Roman. And it's like, oh, this is nice. Right. And, but I just remember sitting there like tabbing through, even as a 16-year-old, and like, God, this sucks. Like, this is just basic Adobe Flash. And it's like, all this could be auto populated. This could be much more like, you know, instead of a billion different services, I could type didn't have that option and so on. So
It
that's awesome.
still feels that way, to be honest with
Are
you.
you
There
serious?
there are some companies out there that are doing some great things and very innovative, but uh, yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
still kind of funny how far behind the curve they are.
Yeah. When did you meet your wife?
We met a long time ago,
Really?
14 years. Yeah, we're coming up on our 15-year anniversary of
Of being like,
being together. Yeah, so
that's crazy, man. I
yeah,
didn't know that. So she's been here the entire journey.
yeah, yeah. She, I put my first lift on her credit card. She's been just an absolute angel to me and my, and really the support for my ambitions. How blind they were for so long,
Sure.
and just I have no idea. That's something that I still can't reconcile in my mind, like how she's stuck with me and stuck behind me all these years. So
Yeah, I think it's so vital, man, to have. I feel like there's a lot of influencers on social media these days that will put on a show and kind of act a certain way. And I, I want to be very clear with people. Without my wife, none of this would be possible. None of this podcast, none of my previous business ventures, none of my future business ventures would be possible without the support, like almost the, like you said, the blind support for these like crazy dreams that we have, and to have somebody in your corner go like, yep, let's do it,
yeah,
full send. It takes good men and makes them great, you
yep,
know. So
yeah.
anyway.
I'd honestly probably be dead if it wasn't for Lauren. I'd probably, or I'd be homeless in Vegas. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but um, it's not.
Yeah, you said you were really into gambling,
Yeah.
like as like going to the ATM using credit card
Well,
bad,
my so
or
my shop was 3.5 hours away from Vegas. So, and everyone that I worked with, they love to go and have a good time. And if you want to talk about uh, companies that have really deconstructed the human psyche and figured out how to leverage the vulnerabilities in all of our cognition, it's like companies like MGM and Caesars and um, yeah, really, they really know how to get you. So
are you a slots guy? Like what type of gambling?
so I've definitely it's definitely evolved for me over the years. There's certain slot machines that I've really liked, but I've always been really into poker. So
Okay.
yeah, Texas Hold'em, namely, was one that I got really into, and that was kind of right around the time that my dad passed away. That party poker popped up, like online poker,
Okay. Yeah.
and that was very challenging because it was so accessible, and again, they're gamifying gambling. So they're just
So
leveraging all
over
these systems
so over your life, are you negative, or are you net positive? Are
that
you keeping track, or it's
I
just
mean,
like at this
that's
point?
like the silliest question ever. I don't think anyone can honestly say that they're net positive on gambling. So if you are, great. I'm
Well, there's
stoked for
that
you.
dude.
Stop
There's
right now.
Yeah, there's that dude up in that's in Las Vegas that's like kicked out of everything,
Um,
and supposedly he makes millions, but I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, I guess if you're Raymond,
I was never smart about it. I was never very intelligent about it. For me, it was more just like, oh, I got this free offer, like I could literally go get 3 hotel rooms in Vegas right now for free and have access to their diamond lounges, which is like top shelf alcohol.
hmm,
And
and
you
free
feel
free
you
so long as you're playing, right?
right. And when you're in your mid 20s, and you're getting like this VIP king treatment, like it is pulling on all of your strings, and making
Yeah.
you feel exactly what you want to feel. And it's a very dangerous
So is
situation.
that when you really started realizing like these things? I almost call it like the veil, right? Like a good portion of people live in almost like a snow globe, and either through trauma or through meditation, through spiritual journeys, whatever it is, this veil almost starts to like part, and you start seeing the inner workings of like, oh, okay, I'm doing this because of whatever it is. For me, a really moving time was through therapy. Therapy was that first, like, let's open the blinds a little bit, and see how much you understand about all that. So when you were going to these casinos and acting kind of rambunctious, you know, going from street racing to rally racing, which is, good. Nobody wants to. Street racing is extremely dangerous,
It is.
and annoying if you shut down blocks because then commuters,
Right.
But is that kind of when you started realizing, is the veil started pulling away and you started looking introspectively, or like,
Honestly, even now, like if I go to Vegas or something, it's definitely in check. But I will say, like the emotions, the feelings, everything is so powerful and so overwhelming that it it really has me, and it's really hard for me to get that separation. Even now, knowing everything that I know about human cognition and these vulnerabilities that we have, I think it's a fun experiment to be doing it and try to name these things and understand the processes that are going on. But it's almost just like, fuck it, I don't care. It's so much fun. It's just there's lights everywhere. There's like perfume in the air vents.
yeah,
It's set at this specific temperature. And I'm telling you, like the amount of money that goes in to hacking you when you go into a casino, it's astronomical. It's like it's insane. And it's just like, social media. These
yeah.
multi-trillion dollar attention stealing engines, like they know exactly what they're doing. They've dumped tremendous amount of resources and time into figuring all this stuff out.
So my algorithm more recently, two things on social media. My algorithm basically switched over to like live feed. It's been like nonstop murders.
Hmm.
And I don't like, it doesn't bother me, but I find myself watching it. It's like a, factory in China, and it's like this giant machine like like slapping metal, you know what I mean? And I'm like, what's gonna happen, because this like worker walks over, they're like looking at something, it stops for a brief second, it like jams, and then they look, and then whoop, bam, and it's like, I just watched someone, disappear. And it's more, and I swear it's because I have a social media for this podcast, and I have a social media for my personal. And it's interesting to see the two different feeds, that if I switch profiles, what the algorithm feeds me.
Right.
And it's gotten pretty dark, man. But a quick hack that I've heard, and I forgot what podcast I was listening to when I heard this. Maybe it might have been the Joe Rogan podcast, when he was anyway, one of his guests. But they were talking about doom scrolling, right? And you just sit there and you scroll, scroll, scroll. And they said a solution or a hack to kind of get past the addictive nature of it is to actually switch your phone to black white,
Oh yeah.
so it doesn't have as many of the colors and all this other stuff. I thought it was pretty interesting. And it's like you'll scroll less,
Right.
while you're sitting on the toilet going through your Instagram
Yeah,
reels.
I've seen a lot of like productivity experts and people say that that's their number one hack is putting their phone on grayscale or whatever it is.
Yeah. I guess it's I get old school, reading the newspaper. It is kind of boring. The thing that gets me about Vegas, I mean, this sounds really lame, but like the casinos where you can smoke
Hmm.
cigars and stuff. Well, one, the ventilation system's great. So unless you're sitting right next to somebody with a cigar, but I enjoy cigars, and there's something that feels pretty nice about walking from blackjack table to blackjack table, smoking a fat stogie, wearing a nice suit.
Well, now you can
you
just
know,
have a joint there. That's the
I don't
crazy.
think so.
Oh yeah.
Not inside the casinos.
Well, I was there for SEMA. SEMA is
Okay.
the big automotive convention every year. So I was out there, yeah, just a month ago, and I haven't been there in a couple of years. So it was really interesting to see uh, marijuana becoming legal there in that time, and how much that has kind of reshaped the dynamic of Vegas. There's actual like dispensaries in Planet Hollywood, like so you're walking through a shopping mall, right? And just they have a little kiosk in the middle that has just a bunch of weed there, and Yeah, it was like 7:30 in the morning. An Uber for me was like $85 or something. So I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna look it up. How long is this gonna take me to get to my hotel?" It said, "Oh, an hour walk." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll pay for my breakfast. I'll stop somewhere nice," you know? So it was 7 in the morning I got in, and, by the time I got to the Strip, you know, it was like 8 AM or something, and, I was walking behind these 2 people, and they were just smoking a joint, and, like, I was walking at this speed where I couldn't really get past them because they were walking at, like, a pretty fast pace.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I got high, like, just from walking on the Strip, but, yeah, it's a really interesting time, and then they were setting up for F1, which was really
Oh
cool
yeah.
to see.
Yeah, I went there for a bachelor party back in I think August or something like that. And they were it was in the earlier stages, but they were still like setting everything up. It was pretty cool to see uh how quickly a city can kind of like jump into high gear
Right,
when so much money is coming in.
exactly.
Now we all know now the F1 race was a complete disaster, just because of the issues on the I think there was a test run or like the qualification or something like that where it sucked the did you watch the video?
I didn't know.
So Ferrari was going around and I guess they have so much downward pressure it basically pulls the earth up towards them on how the cars are set up, and it sucked a sewer drain plate and smacked the car, completely destroyed this car
Oh my
and
god.
destroyed the track. So is this whole shenanigans, and then people that were coming into town spent all this money, didn't get a refund, and I think they gave them Griffin ended up going. They gave him like $600 to spend at the F1 shop. So hey, we're gonna cancel the race or delay it, but to pay you back, we'll give you $600 to spend on us, so we look good. You know what I mean? It's just crazy. So what's the most amount of days you can stay in Vegas and stay sane? Because I know how many I can.
Yeah, mine's like 1 night, maybe 2 max.
Yeah, I was there for 3 nights, 4 days,
Wow.
and I was fried, completely fried. Not
It
financially, I was fried. I was like, I feel like I just got robbed.
Yeah.
But
It is different for me now because I don't drink, so
okay,
that has definitely changed my relationship with Vegas and everything that comes along
dude,
with it.
those high octanes, man.
Yeah.
Those high octanes are just they're so cheap, they're so good, and man, they will get you drunk
Are
fast.
they sponsoring this podcast right now?
No, but I like them so much that I'm okay with telling people if you go to Vegas, the best bang for your buck is going to be going to find those high octane. I think it's called high octane or something like that, but it's you spend like $25. It seems like a lot, but you get to keep the souvenir, and you have one of those, and you're good for like 4 hours. You're good for 2 hours, and then the next two, you're kind of regretting your decision to drink it, but good times. Yeah, 3 nights, 4 days was too much. I remember on the second day, I texted Kaylee and I was like, I'm ready for this to end. It was, and it was a weird, like, I was still getting those dopamine hits, but at the same time, like, I had lost a little bit of cash that I was already kind of upset about.
Mhm.
So I was like, I came here with cash to lose. So I'm okay with that, but mentally, I'm not.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm having so much fun. And yeah, the nightclubs there are dope, though. Pool
Yeah.
parties.
It's a fun place.
Yeah. So when did you, I guess, kind of dial that all back? It had to have been before you came to Colorado, right?
Yeah, I would say it was probably right around the time that I was like 20, what, 28, 29, like when I went to programming school and I
Okay.
really started getting serious about what I wanted to do because I never saw myself in an auto repair shop the rest of my life. It was not something um, that I ever really enjoyed. I liked working on my own cars,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really more like I really liked racing cars and getting in. That's when I could kind of connect with the flow state, and really feel like I was who I needed to be and, doing what I needed to be doing at the time. So for me, it was like a means to an end almost.
The auto shop.
Yeah. And working on cars.
What was your mental state during this whole time? Was
I'd
there
say,
anything like significant that, you experienced or anything that kind of changed gears a little bit?
yeah. So I would say, um, I did start going to therapy, and this was really my first time experiencing therapy was when I was, in my mid 20s. I found this, she was a PhD psychologist, but she was also like a business consultant. So it was like a really cool transition for me where I was like, hey, I want to scale my business up. But I'm also having some of these like mental issues that I would prefer to be without. So, uh,
Like what?
well, yeah, I'd say the gambling was a big thing. That was really challenging for me to get through. The drinking that was something that was challenging, and just really not understanding the drive. Like, why did I want to scale my business up and take over the world? Like, why did I have these internal drivers? And there was just so much, um, like, negative feelings and emotions inside of me for so long that it finally got to the point where it was like, I have to address this. I don't want to live like this anymore. Um, it's not fun. It sucks, and I feel like a lot of people have that experience at some point in their life. And, uh, unfortunately, like, a lot of people take their life because it is a very intense experience when you just feel like, you're ruminating on the same shit like for months on end. Um, so luckily I had the resources available to me because I had so much cash flowing through the shop that, for me to go pay a therapist $150 a week was nothing, and it was, um,
Isn't that a shame though?
yeah, it is.
That, and I'm not saying therapists don't deserve that much money. Because trust me, the shit I talk about with my therapist, he deserves every dollar he makes. You know,
I can
um,
imagine.
so but it is so sad that there are so many people that are experiencing that, regardless of whether or not it's. I just want to relate it to other people who aren't building businesses, right? You can still have these internal drives that literally almost send you into a psychosis of like, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this, I need to do that, and it's constantly, it's like you're wearing yourself down into the ground and you don't even realize you're doing it because you think you're building yourself up.
Hmm.
And I know from my military experience, there are tons of people that are doing it in their careers. I need to get on rank. I need to promote. I need to go to this class. I need to do this. I need to do that. And it's such a detriment, not only to themselves, but to their family lives. They always say, oh, it's the military sacrifice. There are some things that you don't need to miss. You don't need to miss the first birth of your first child
Right.
because you're afraid to say no to a deployment. Like, I get it if we're at a large scale war, but I do want to relate it to other people who aren't building a business, that shit still goes on in their brain.
Oh, 100%. Everyone deals with this shit,
Yeah.
like, at some point in their lives. And if you don't, God bless you. Like, that is a miracle
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. So you start going to therapy and then it's helping out a lot.
Yeah. And, it was just really interesting because I had this transition happen where I was really fascinated by cars and understanding how they work, and, you know, taking parts of taking cars apart. And, I could literally have like my Subaru in 1,000 different pieces, not have any manual, no nothing, just from memory somehow, be able to know what little nut, what bolt goes where, what part goes where, and put it all together, and the thing runs. And that to me was always really fascinating. And to be able to see something that has such a massive impact on our lives, a vehicle, it's a
Mm-hmm.
vehicle to take you to places, to, it's, the second most expensive asset that most people purchase in their lifetime. And just being able to see something that impactful and be able to see it as a system, in little tiny parts and as a whole, there was something about that that always struck me. And as I started going to therapy and I started learning, I just started picking up on the process, because for me, I I want to know how to do shit. I want to know how to fix stuff myself. I don't want to have to call a plumber. I want to be able to do it myself. Um, so the same applied with therapy, and I started seeing the patterns and just absorbing them, and having this intuition come to me where it was like, hey, um, there's a lot of parallels between cars and yourself. Like, if you can figure out how to diagnose a car, you can diagnose yourself. Um, so I started getting really interested in like psychodynamics and psychotherapy, psychology, all these different fields. And it was just really interesting too. I had with that therapist, it was kind of an inappropriate situation that happened on uh, coming from her end that was really strange. I don't want to get in the details of it, but I ended up going to another therapist. Um, this was one that my wife uh, was going to, and her and I actually went to this couple's therapist, and she was great. She was awesome, but I like needed more, because it kind of got to the point where I was like, we're just talking, we're just having conversations. Like, I want to know more. I want to deconstruct this shit. I want to be able to uh, learn this stuff so I can spread it to other people and transfer it uh, to other people that I see struggling. That to me was like a huge opportunity, and and ironically, she was like, you know what? There's this therapist that I think you would connect really well with. So I ended up going to him, and he had this system and this structure. It was it was just mind blowing for me that this guy came up with this after his like 95 years of doing this. Um, this was what he came up with, and it was so simple and elegant. And I actually went to him and I'm like, hey, can we like let's build this, let's make this into an app. And
Do you remember his name?
I do not want to say his name,
Oh, okay.
because he so I ended up having my wife go there with me one of these sessions because I wanted her to learn this. um, he was very apprehensive to making it into an app. He was very
Sure.
protective over his system and his structure, and I respected it. I just wanted to lean in and keep learning his process. And I brought my wife in there, and uh, we were having some like a challenging situation that her and I were going through that we were talking to him about. And he was like teaching her, and he had asked me a question, and it made me like giggle a little bit because it made me uncomfortable and brought out something. But he interpreted that as like me making fun of him or something, and he just lost it, dude. He started like spitting in rage and just like, you think you can turn this into a fucking app, blah blah blah, all this. And I'm like, this guy, we're paying him $350 an hour, and I broke him like somehow, unintentionally. Um, so
And
that was
how unprofessional too, man.
it was wild, and my wife and I still like laugh about that, and just joke around about the situation a lot, because it was so like, what happened there? But
Yeah.
needless to say, that was the last time we saw him, and that was actually the last therapist that I went to. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna spearhead this shit. I'm gonna really learn and deconstruct it. And there were so many times where it was like, this is it. This is the fountain of youth for mental health, and just um, and then learning more and more, and like becoming humbled
Yeah.
by different processes and just the complexity of the human mind. And like, like, um, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to figure this shit out.
Do you feel like did you do any traveling or anything like that?
Yeah,
Experience any like
yeah. So that was another amazing thing that the shop afforded me, was I was able to go to China. So the
okay.
best man at my wedding, Rob, He's a really fun guy, and he was born in Shanghai, and he still had family out there, so he invited me on a trip with him. And I was actually starting a tire recycling company,
Okay.
so I was really interested. That was one of the problems that I saw in the auto repair industry too. Is like, and it's still there. Like you see all these tire shops that just have stacks and stacks and stacks of tires outside, and they're actually really like bad for our environment. They're really um, bad because they like store a lot of critters and have a lot of disease in them and stuff. So
Hmm.
this was a problem that I saw. Like, oh well, that's just money sitting there. So I did the work and built out a business model. Went to China with my buddy Rob,
What year
and
was this?
oh man, this was
The reason why I ask is it sounds like you're so like with your experience of Catholicism and yeah, I do. How do I say this? There is a separation of faith and introspectiveness, but sometimes they coincide. And we've had conversations offline before where it's like, you know, faith can give you a perspective on something, or like a religion can give you a perspective. So I'm just curious, did you ever look into like Buddhism, Hinduism? I know that's pretty big in Asia. I don't know about China, but just in Asia in general. And
so at that time I really wasn't exploring that part of it. I still kind of had like this weird bad taste in my mouth for anything religious or spiritual based.
yeah.
So that transition, and when I guess we'll talk about that later, but that was something that kind of came a little bit further along in the journey.
Okay.
But when I went to China, it was really, uh,
Find tires.
yeah.
Figure
Well,
out.
so we went to some tire recycling manufacturer, like some plant manufacturers. So they made the equipment to turn tires into chrome rubber,
Okay.
and it's really interesting because there's actually a lot of business cases for and products that you can make out of tire. You know, you can make asphalt, you
Hmm.
can make fuel, tire derived fuel. Um, you can make like playground flooring. Like there's all of these things, and yeah, it was way too much money to spin up. It ended up being, you know, like $2 million that I needed to raise, and I just didn't know how to raise money at that time.
Well, right on, man.
But yeah,
Well,
Shanghai is freaking awesome, and China was like the coolest place that I've ever gone to. And there was, and I think this was another really transformative experience for me. Is it was the first time that I really went somewhere and felt like a complete alien. You know, you land at the airport, you get off the plane, and no one speaks your language. You can't communicate with anybody. All of the signs, all the advertisements there, they're all in Mandarin. There's no English symbols like you see um, some girl on a billboard and there's Mandarin symbols, and you're like, what the fuck are they selling? You're like, I have no idea. But it was really interesting, and like looking back on it now and understanding like what that kind of afforded me. It
Mhm.
afforded me an experience where I wasn't being bombarded trying to be sold stuff, you know, or having these systems hijacked because they just couldn't communicate with that part of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
There's an interesting Instagram post. I do enjoy Instagram just because of the algorithm I have for my personal profile is better than the algorithm I had for the SNE podcast. Like I said, it kind of went unhinged. But there was this really cool photo that I saw, and it was like, I've never done psychedelics for the record, except for ketamine, which was therapeutic and done under, the auspice of a doctor. But it was this post of like what you see before you I think it said ascend or something like that, ascend past the materialism. And it's like a bunch of advertisements, and it's like Times Square in New York City, right? And it's like what you see afterwards, like after you ascend, of like pulling this veil away. And it's like obey, consume, obey,
mm,
obey, consume,
mm,
consume. And it's like that was pretty moving for me because as you do a lot of introspective work, you start looking at the strings that are almost being pulled, and going back to Las Vegas, how much these companies have put into learning you as a person and what have you done to learn yourself.
Right.
And I think it's a great analogy of what you said earlier of we, deconstructing this vehicle and putting it back together. I've always thought that our bodies are literal vehicles or vessels for our souls, and nobody takes the time to learn it.
And that's what's so fascinating too, is just like really taking this journey seriously and exploring all of these different uh, religions and sciences uh, and just all of these different people from all these different walks of life throughout human history from different time periods, and just really getting to the essence and to the bottom of what it is that they are getting to,
Mm-hmm.
and it aligns exactly with what you're talking about. And I try not to be very like too set on anything, because I feel like that's where you get too much into the propositional, too much into the personal story that really is the same fabric as the veil that you're talking about. Uh,
You're just exchanging one for the other, and it is a humans like comfort, so if we can feel like we're progressing, we're very happy to go from one comfort to another comfort, but it could still be that veil. So I completely agree.
totally.
I need to pee real quick, so we'll take a quick little break, and then we'll jump back into more about uh the venture you're on now with Nestheads.
Sounds great.
Cool, man. Coming up next on the Something Nothing Everything podcast.
So I decided to close the shop um, back in 2018. I just, something wasn't right. Something didn't feel right. Here, I found myself no shop, no startup, no job, no nothing. Just sitting in my apartment playing Fortnite. Like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? So we had gone out to the desert camping, and I had this weird experience. I don't know if you call it a mystical experience or something. There wasn't any like psychedelics or anything involved there. But I, and I was really at that time like contemplating killing myself.